As I've mentioned in my previous videos, I really dislike Cave Story 3D. Like, really dislike Cave Story 3D. I always tell my friends that you can't hate what you haven't played, and I've mentioned in my ports video that I didn't even own a copy of 3D, and I can't go down as a hypocrite. Now, simply watching a playthrough of Cave Story 3D should have been enough to see that this game truly does a god-awful job of being a cave story game. But don't worry, now of committing the sin of actually buying and playing the game to completion, I can finally dig into the nitty-gritty of this game and nobody can stop me. Also, before I get started, I want to mention the footage you're looking at and all the footage I bring up for this game is not mine due to my 3DS capture card not being on my main 3DS. And if you want to see the full unedited versions of the clips that I use in this video, I'll leave links to all the videos I used in the description below. And just before we get to bullying the port, I do want to mention a few things about the game I actually did end up enjoying a lot. For those of you who don't know, this version of the game is where the remastered version of the Cave Story soundtrack originates, and my god, is this version of the soundtrack just gorgeous. I truly owe my life to Danny Baranowski, who is the genius behind this soundtrack. If his name sounds familiar to a few of you, that's because he's also the one behind the soundtrack of Super Meat Boy, another neat game if I do say so myself. One thing to note about the soundtrack, there are actually tracks for Cave Story 3D that go completely unused in game, but that doesn't mean it's lost media just yet. NIS America's official website for Cave Story 3D still has this music playable in the background, but the website does require Flash, so its time is limited. Here, we can listen to the remade version of the main theme in a lot more of a calmer fashion, played on what sounds like some string instruments, and it's phenomenal. The song was used for the game's official trailer, so while not entirely unused, I'd love to officially have this song's actual file on my computer. And that's not the only version of the theme we get, no. The website also holds two more versions of the theme. The first is what sounds like an orchestral version of the theme that's very bombastic, but I can't help but love it. The third version of the song on the website is actually an official trans remix of the game's theme, which is cool but also weird to think that there's an official trans remix of the Cave Story theme. Another cool thing about this game is that it genuinely does nail how some of the levels are supposed to look in 3D. The best example in the whole game being Mimiga Village. This area looks amazing in 3D and I love what the team did for it. Everything has a lot more detail and overall the entire area looks a lot more alive with tons of plantation growing. Even the sub areas like Yamashita Farm and the cemetery look pretty damn good in this game. Not every area in this game looks great, I'll be the first to say that, but Mimiga Village is definitely one of the good ones. Another is actually an entirely new area made just for Cave Story 3D, and it's the Falling Tower. This area is reached right after the boss fight against the Undead Core, and it's genuinely a really neat thing to see new Cave Story areas made after so many years. This isn't the only new area made just for the game either. 3D actually has other rooms built just for it, and areas like Labyrinth M were extended, as well as Egg Corridor 2 getting the brand new Egg Corridor Detour. But Falling Tower is definitely the best of the bunch. I honestly really wish we got a Cave Story Definitive Edition with all these levels built in just so I can play them with the classic graphics. Hell, I'll make this version of the game if I have to, damn it. Now with the count 'em, two good things about this game out of the way, let's go over everything else this mess of a game holds. First thing to mention about this game is all the glitches this version of the game is infamous for. Now, I'm a fan of glitches in video games as much as the next guy, but this game just downright feels unfinished with how unpolished it is. Glitches in this game range from being able to obtain items that were meant to go completely unused, to being able to obtain infinite health, which makes the game a lot easier compared to the 55 health you get in the original Cave Story. Speaking of which, the max life you can hit in Cave Story 3D without glitches is 98, almost double from the original game. I'd say a good half of the life you obtain to this game is also just given out by talking to characters. Not even optional dialogue, I mean story-based dialogue. One case I remember this happening with is with Jenka, in which she gives you a bonus 1 HP for each puppy you bring her, except the last one, which kind of bothers my OCD because it leaves you at 44 HP and not 45, but point is, you get a lot of HP with this game. At least we can say it's beginner friendly. Sticking to just the base game, this game looks horrible and is hard to look at. And I'm not just saying that because it's ugly, I literally mean it's hard to look at this game. This entire game looks incredibly dark for no reason whatsoever, and it honestly makes some parts of the game pretty hard. I legitimately found fights like the Undead Core much harder purely because I could barely see anything. And the worst part about this is that some rooms look perfectly lit. Playing the true version of the last cave was genuinely fun because I could actually see what I was doing. Another thing that makes the world confusing is this game's strange camera use. For some reason, there's specific parts of rooms and levels that you can be in that will completely change the angle of how you're viewing the room. The easiest example to bring up is the first room you wake up in. When you start off, yeah, it looks fine as far as being able to see everything, but when you leave and re-enter the room, the camera looks down on the room as if you're playing this game from a bird's eye view. There are tons of rooms like this throughout the game, and it really takes away from some of the rooms at most times. Now, when I say this game is ugly, I really mean this game looks god-awful. NIS America did publish this game, and usually NIS America goes above and beyond for quality, but don't get mad at them. This game was all Nicalis and only published by NIS America. Why Nicalis decided to slap NIS America's name on this, I have no clue. But one cute thing that did come out of this is definitely the artwork of Prinny wearing quotes attire and being able to unlock the Prinny hat in Cave Story 3D. Just like how I have a problem with Curly Sprite in Cave Story Plus, I have an even worse problem and nightmares about Quote's model in this game. He's just so blank and robotic. Now, listen, I understand that Quote is literally a blank robot, but even the classic sprite work has more emotion and soul than this model. We get an incredibly detailed and up-close look at this model actually in Cave Story 3D's teaser trailer. And my god, as far as trailers go, this has to be the barest of the bone when it comes to trailers. Character models on a white background for not even a minute, it's as if this trailer already told us they weren't going to put much effort into the game. Going back to Curly Brace, we can actually visit the game's website and see that they actually have good Curly Brace concept art on here. I definitely feel like someone at NIS America made this art because it's really good and a lot better than the art that we actually got for Curly on the box art and her model in game. As much as I hate to say it, even the Mimiga look awful. I get this whole game was trying to go for a chibi aesthetic, but somewhere when developing the models, the Mimiga did not translate well. Sometimes they're cute, but other times they're just incredibly awkward and feel out of place even. Speaking of out of place, some enemy assets didn't even get updated for 3D environment. They're still 2D sprites. Examples of this being the fuzz enemies still being 2D, but the fuzz cores being entirely new 3D models. Don't get me wrong, the fuzz core still looks bad, but if you're gonna commit to an art style, at least carry some consistency with it. Don't just give up in some areas and try to take the good sprite work down with you. And the sprites that they did update are all the wrong ones. The worst sprite work of all was King's Spirit on the level 3 blade. Minor spoiler alert, but for those who have never played the game, when King dies, he gives you his blade as a weapon, and when fully upgraded to level 3, King's Spirit will come out and do really good AoE damage. But in Cave Story 3D, you don't even get to see King. You see a very basic empty Mimigo sprite, which really makes it feel a lot less cool and really does King as a character incredibly dirty. Now, branching off of how this game looks, it just runs terribly on the 3DS. I played this game on an original 3DS XL because of the bigger screen and noticed it ran terribly, so I played it on my new 3DS for its better use of power in games, and it still ran horrible. Not only that, but even using custom firmware to overclock my 3DS, this game still ran terribly. Now, I assume this isn't a hardware problem, as the 3DS can do some pretty amazing things, but for Cave Story 3D to not only run at 30 FPS but still dip into the 20s is awful. I never in my life thought I would have to play a version of Cave Story that struggles to run in some areas, but somehow Nicalis did it. And to top this video off with a personal experience, after going through this atrocity of a version of my favorite game, I didn't get the true ending. And don't get me wrong, I wanted to see the true ending as much as the next guy. I wanted to be able to see if I can make it through an impossible to see version of the Bloodstained Sanctuary, and I wanted to take on Balos with all 999 of my HP with the Beast Fang equipped, but the prefab house wouldn't open, and I made sure I did everything right. I obtained the Booster 2.0, I saved Curly, have the Iron Bond, even fought my way through the true final cave, and still have my life pot because I would hate to have Balos actually take all my 999 HP once, so I had to have a backup. I genuinely have no idea what I did wrong and constantly checked my other versions of the game to make sure I had everything right, but unless Cave Story 3D has some additional step that I didn't do, I really don't know what more I could have done outside of the usual tasks to get the true ending. So as much as I'd love to complain about how they probably ruined the best fight in the game, I'm not playing through 3D twice. But at least I have the Printy Cap. As I mentioned in my every Cave Story port ever made video, I jumped quite the conclusion and said to skip this version of Cave Story. And after an entire playthrough and playing a very strong $32 for this game that is 9 years old, I would absolutely say, please for the love of God skip this version.